I went on 10 expeditions before I ever set foot on Mount Everest. So in the sense, it was a natural progression from all the climbing I'd been doing. But I think when I went with Robert and Ed and Paul to Everest, I had a sort of feeling, I had a sort of hunch, this is going to be a really special expedition. They were a great team, new route, really exciting route. 10 years earlier, Reinhold Messner and Peter Habeler, they'd climbed Everest without oxygen, and we thought they must be supermen. And then 10 years later, here were we. I was doing it. Thought, well, actually, I can do this too. And that's a wonderfully sort of liberating realization. And I also had a feeling that I think we might just pull this off. But to pull it off, we're going to have to sort of really ramp up the risk levels. And it's going to, for me, it was going to be a big sort of step into the unknown. So I think you're treading this sort of dangerous edge. As it turned out, the final push to the summit, I was at my absolute physiological limit. All that day I was sort of crossing barriers. It was quite strange being on the summit completely alone, because I was sad that we didn't all get there together, all four of us, which would have been fantastic, but that was unlikely to happen. It was clouding over. You're just there alone in this silent white space. It was very, very special. And it didn't feel lonely, because you're carrying with you all your memories, all your thoughts of all your friends and family and all the people who've made this possible. As it happened, when I was coming back from the summit, it was getting dark. I wasn't sure that I was on the right route, and eventually I thought, this is crazy. Rather than risk a mistake in the dark, I should just stop and do what would seem unthinkable, just to lie down in the open at about 28,000 feet. Once I'd resigned myself to that, I just went about it quite methodically. I cut a ledge in the snow. I made sure I could lie out full stretch to try and keep the circulation going. And basically I just lay there and shivered for about 7 hours. And it was grim, but I knew that other people had done this before. Again, it's the same thing. If you know someone else has done it, you think, well, maybe I could do this too. And I think these things are 90% in the mind. In the case of our Everest climb, I probably pushed myself harder than I ever had done before. And I think it was definitely my mind willing this puny body to do what it didn't want to do. And that's very rewarding. And we all have it in us. Anyone can do it. It's just whether you actually make the decision to do it. There's a sort of high altitude game people play where they get on this sort of treadmill of climbing 8,000 meter peaks. And in my case, after Everest, I decided I wasn't going to do that. But I didn't want to give up Himalayan climbing. So 3 years later, I went and climbed a beautiful route on a mountain called Kusum Kangaroo. And then later that year, I went back to the Himalayas to India, and we climbed several new routes on peaks of about 22,000 feet, not too high, but high enough. And we ended up in the final days of that expedition making the first ascent of a peak called Panchachuli 5. And it was a great climb because we snatched it in the last days of the expedition. There were 5 of us: Chris Bonington, Steve Sustad, Victor Saunders, Dick Renshaw and myself. And we did this sort of commando raid and got to the summit of this peak on the last day of the expedition. And everything was going fine, but on the way down from the summit, when we'd been on the go for about 24 hours, we were descending in the night in bad weather, and I suffered the ultimate climber's nightmare when the abseil anchor failed. You could hear it, bing, as this peg came out, and I tumbled about 80 meters down the mountain and broke both my legs. And my immediate reaction when I regained consciousness, surprised to discover that I was still alive, was, that's it, I've done it, I must give up this climbing. Because I had a young son back at home, 1-year-old son and wife, and I did feel very guilty about having put myself in that position and allowing myself so nearly to die. And it so happened, actually, perhaps a lesson was learned, because I haven't given up climbing, but that was the last really committed Himalayan climb I did. I think what happens with mountaineering and expeditioning is that it gets under your skin and you can't quite shake it off. And I like going to new places. I think a lot of it is to do with new horizons. And in fairly recent years, I've been to Tierra del Fuego, several times to South Georgia and the Southern Ocean. It's something about this combination of sea and mountains and wildlife in an incredibly remote place with the icebergs drifting up from Antarctica. It just has a magic all of its own. There are also all these other hardly known mountains. There are many peaks in the Himalayas that have not even had a second ascent or even a first ascent. There are whole areas of Antarctica that are still unexplored. There are people pushing the technical boundaries to do ever more remarkable things, climb things at speeds and at levels of difficulty which would have been unimaginable 100 years ago. And those possibilities are very exciting.